In late 1997, a series of unsolved murders began to surface in southern Louisiana. The victims were men, ranging from 16 to 40 years old, who died under eerily similar circumstances. Despite these chilling similarities, the police initially had no reason to believe that these deaths were connected. But as the years went by, the bodies kept turning up, scattered across the highways, floating in swamps, rotting in sugarcane fields, and half buried in ditches. By 2006, almost a decade after the first victim was found, the FBI finally decided to take action. They began a full investigation, but they never could have imagined that the key to solving the case would come from the sole survivor, a man who had managed to escape the clutches of the killer. The early life of Ronald Joseph Dominique. Ronald Joseph Dominique was born on January 9, 1964, in the town of Thibodaux, Louisiana, located in the southern part of the state. The youngest of 6 children, Ronald grew up in a family that struggled financially. His parents couldn't provide much for their children, and the family lived on the outskirts of town in a trailer park. Due to their lack of financial stability and his own social struggles, Ronald was a quiet, introverted child. His low self-esteem and obesity made him an easy target for bullying at school. The only place where he felt comfortable was in the school choir, where he spent much of his time. Despite his difficult childhood, he seemed to remain a generally well-liked figure in his neighborhood, often helping neighbors with gardening or running errands. Ronald's secret desire and social struggles. As a teenager, Ronald's loneliness only deepened. He was never able to make lasting friendships and wasn't involved in activities like sports, drugs, or alcohol. He didn't fit in with his peers, and his classmates often saw him as an outsider. Ronald began to realize he was attracted to men, a secret that would lead him to visit a local gay bar. When word spread among his classmates, he became the target of relentless teasing. He denied the rumors, but the taunting only worsened, and it eventually turned into outright harassment. After high school, Ronald attended Nicholls State University, where he studied computer science but soon dropped out, feeling uninspired and lost. He wandered through life, unable to find his passion. The one thing that brought him any joy was performing at local gay bars, where he would dress up as the famous singer Patti LaBelle and put on shows. Although the performances earned him some money, they couldn't bring him a stable career, and he was forced into low-paying jobs over the years. A pattern of crime begins. In 1985, at the age of 21, Ronald found himself arrested for phone harassment. He was fined $75, but this marked the beginning of a troubling criminal pattern. Over the years, he was arrested multiple times for minor offenses, including driving under the influence and public intoxication. But nothing compared to the serious crime he would commit in August 1996. One night, a young man jumped out of Ronald's sister's window, partially undressed, and claimed that Ronald had invited him to his trailer and tried to tie him up. When the man refused, Ronald became violent and attempted to kill him. The neighbors called the police, and Ronald was arrested. However, the victim did not appear in court, and the charges were dropped. This would prove to be the start of a deadly new phase in Ronald's life. The first murder. A dark turn. It was just a year after the assault case was dropped that Ronald Joseph Dominique committed his first murder. In July 1997, the body of David Mitchell, a 19-year-old black man, was found in a canal in St. Charles Parish. He was partially nude and had signs of ligature marks on his neck, suggesting he had been strangled. But with little evidence at the scene, police could not identify a suspect. At the time, David's death seemed like a one-off tragedy, until more bodies began to surface. Over the next few years, the bodies of more young men were discovered across southern Louisiana. Some were dumped in sugarcane fields. Others were found in ditches or left beside highways. Many were naked or partially clothed, and nearly all had been strangled. But since the victims came from different parishes and varied racial backgrounds, no one in law enforcement saw the connection. That was Ronald's advantage. He understood how fragmented Louisiana's police system was, and he used that to his benefit. The victim profile. Ronald's victims had a few things in common. Most were young, poor, and vulnerable. Many were either homeless, drug addicts, or sex workers. Ronald specifically targeted men he thought wouldn't be missed, those whose disappearances wouldn't spark major investigations. He would cruise through gay bars, truck stops, or poorer areas, offering money for sex. Once the men agreed and went back to his trailer, Ronald would suggest they let him tie them up. Then, once they were restrained, he would rape and strangle them. And after the murder, Ronald would load the bodies into his car, drive them across parish lines, and dump them in rural or hard-to-reach areas, sometimes in a ditch, sometimes in a swamp. His strategy was clear: keep the bodies away from each other to throw off law enforcement. Living a double life. While the body count was rising, Ronald lived a seemingly normal life. He stayed at homeless shelters or trailer parks and kept a low profile. To his neighbors, he was harmless, friendly even. He volunteered at events, helped people carry groceries, and rarely made trouble. No one suspected that the quiet, overweight man living down the road was a serial killer. In fact, Ronald hated violence. At least that's what he told people. He even claimed to be scared of the idea of going to prison. He didn't carry a gun. He had no history of fighting. But underneath that soft-spoken exterior was a man consumed by loneliness, rage, and a desperate desire for control. The survivors. There were at least 2 men who managed to escape Ronald's trap. One of them was a homeless man who later told investigators that Ronald had offered him a place to sleep and some food. Once inside the trailer, Ronald tried to tie him up, claiming it was part of the fun. When the man refused, Ronald became agitated, but the man sensed danger and managed to escape. At the time, he didn't go to the police. Who would believe a homeless guy accusing a stranger of attempted rape? It wasn't until years later, when the murders started making headlines, that this survivor realized how close he had come to being another body in the ditch. The body count rises. Between 1997 and 2005, Ronald Dominique is believed to have killed at least 23 men. For nearly a decade, he managed to avoid arrest, even as the murders gained attention. By 2005, people in southern Louisiana were beginning to whisper about a serial killer. The FBI got involved and created a task force called Operation HOPE, Help Our People Endure. They gathered evidence, created timelines, and interviewed potential witnesses. But without a suspect, they were still in the dark. Everything changed in 2006, when Ronald made one crucial mistake. The mistake that caught a killer. It was in November 2006 that Ronald Dominique's years of murder finally began to unravel. Ronald had picked up a man named Ricky Wallace, offering him money to come back to his trailer for sex. But this time, Ronald didn't realize that Ricky wasn't as desperate or submissive as the others. When Ronald tried to tie him up, Ricky fought back. A struggle broke out, and somehow, Ricky managed to escape and ran straight to the police. This wasn't just a scared runaway. Ricky gave a full, detailed report: Ronald's trailer location, his car, the timeline of events, and most importantly, that Ronald tried to tie him up against his will. Police immediately began surveillance on Ronald Dominique. After reviewing old case files, they realized his name had come up before, during the 2002 rape accusation, and even once in 1996. That was enough to make him a suspect, so they brought him in for questioning. The DNA bombshell. During questioning, Ronald was calm and polite, but police knew they didn't have enough to charge him. Yet. So they asked him to voluntarily give a DNA sample. Shockingly, Ronald agreed. That DNA sample was a match to semen found on multiple victims' bodies. On December 1st, 2006, Ronald Dominique was officially arrested for the murders of several young men. As the evidence piled up, police realized they had just caught one of the most prolific serial killers in U.S. history, and almost no one had even heard of him. The chilling confession. After just 2 days in custody, Ronald broke. He confessed to killing 23 men over a 9-year period. Not only that, he described each murder in horrifying detail. The names, the method, where he dumped the body, how he lured each victim. He remembered everything. Here's where it gets chilling. He told investigators he never planned the murders. He just snapped. But his pattern showed otherwise. He hunted, targeted, and executed his victims with care. He picked people who wouldn't fight back, people society wouldn't miss. That was intentional. In his confession, Ronald said, "I didn't want to hurt them. I just didn't want them to tell on me. But he raped them, strangled them, and dumped their bodies. Over and over again. He claimed he was afraid of going to prison. That's why he killed. Because he believed if they lived, they'd report him. So in his mind, murder was his version of self-protection. The courtroom Ronald was indicted for multiple counts of first-degree murder. But in 2008, he made a deal with prosecutors. He would plead guilty to all 23 murders in exchange for avoiding the death penalty. The judge sentenced him to 8 life terms, without the possibility of parole. There was no trial, no jury, no long courtroom drama. Just a guilty man sitting quietly as his crimes were read out. And with that, Ronald Dominique, the Bayou Strangler, disappeared into the prison system. Why didn't you know about him? Even though he killed more people than Jeffrey Dahmer, John Wayne Gacy, or Ted Bundy, Ronald Dominique's story barely made national news. Why? His victims were black men, often homeless, addicted, or gay. People the media often ignores. The murders happened in small towns and rural parishes, not major cities. He wasn't charismatic. He wasn't handsome. He didn't fit the evil genius narrative. He was just ordinary. In a way, that's what makes him so terrifying. He was invisible, and so were his victims. Even today, Ronald Dominique remains locked up in the Louisiana State Penitentiary at Angola, a place where the worst of the worst are kept. He'll never walk free again. He'll die behind bars, forgotten by the same world that ignored his victims for years. And that's the final tragedy. He didn't just kill 23 people. He killed 23 stories, 23 futures, and almost no one cared. Because they were poor, they were gay, they were addicts, or they were black. Let this case be a reminder that monsters don't always look like monsters, that justice often arrives too late, and that society's silence sometimes allows evil to grow right under our noses. Thank you for watching this episode. If this story gave you chills, made you think, or taught you something new, please support the channel with a like or comment. It really helps. Don't forget to subscribe and hit the bell icon so you won't miss the next disturbing true crime case we cover.